We'll be hearing from a man who we had to struggle to break out of his media shyness to come down here to talk to us. He's very shy, very introverted, but we did well to get him down here. I speak, of course, of Peter Beattie. He is the chairman of the Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games Corporation. He's a man who holds many hats. He is a Sky News commentator, a former Queensland Trade Commissioner to the United States, ambassador to Life Sciences Queensland, a fairly recently appointed ARL Commissioner, so he's slightly distracted today for other reasons. And he had some job in Queensland politics some years ago. Yes. Long-serving Queensland Premier. Peter will speak, and then we'll invite our all-star sporting panel up here to speak as well and take your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm Melbourne welcome to Peter Beattie.
Well, thank you, Michael. Can I firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and can I acknowledge some of our distinguished guests here today? Of course, Cathy Freeman, of whom I've been a fan for many, many years, as we all have been. Steve Moneghetti, who has the job of being the chef de mission at the Commonwealth Games, which is why he's so relaxed. Caitlin Bassett, of course, who is the Diamonds netball team captain. I need to acknowledge Craig Phillips, of course, who's sitting down there trying to look shy, who's the CEO of Commonwealth Games Australia. If you've got any really tough questions about the Games, that's where you go. Give me the easy ones, he gets the hard ones. I do want to acknowledge our sponsors as well. Michael acknowledged the sponsors for today, but I do want to acknowledge Optus, of course, Minna Ellison, News Limited, Fairfax and Lion. You can see we're apolitical when it comes to news. We love News Limited and we love Fairfax. In fact, as I was just commenting to Tom, it's taken me a long time to say I love News Limited, but since they're a sponsor for the Games, I've fallen in love with News Limited. All the members of the Labor Party will be now cringing, but that doesn't matter. By the way, I should thank you all for coming. I know Kevin Rudd's in town launching his book and you had to make a choice. You have made the right choice. I haven't read the book, nor do I intend to. So, let me come to the Games and what's important. I do want to acknowledge Melbourne, because Michael made reference to the fact that the best Commonwealth Games were held in Melbourne. The truth of the matter is, that's true. You'd expect the ABC to tell you the truth, and on this occasion they have. We spent a lot of time with Ron Walker and John Harden. Of course, Ron Walker was the chair, John Harden was the CEO. If you looked at the success of the Games, you frankly couldn't do better than Melbourne. And that's why we benchmark against what Melbourne is doing and what they've done. And there's no point reinventing the wheel. If indeed somebody has done it really well, of course you look at their role model, you benchmark against them, and then you pick on their experience to try and run the best games you possibly can. If we run games that are as good as Melbourne, we'll be absolutely delighted. Now, none of you ever thought you'd hear a Queenslander say that. So suck that up, note it down, it'll probably never happen again. So let me tell you where the Games are. Yes, it's 159 days to go. The Games are on budget and they're on time. Now, I say that because the Commonwealth Games, in a sense, are being tested by what's happening on the Gold Coast and in Queensland. You would have noticed that South Africa were to hold them next, and unfortunately that didn't happen for all sorts of reasons, and right at the moment the next Games in 4 years' time will be held in the UK. That means that we had to get it right. Not only is this going to be a really important sporting event where you'll see the best athletes in Australia, and hopefully they'll inspire a whole new generation of athletes, but these events have to leave a legacy. And indeed, if this is just a sporting event and it doesn't leave a legacy, then we've failed. So the way the organising committee looks at this, and Craig's one of the board members, this is about leaving a lasting legacy for all of Australia. And I just want to make the point that while these events are being held in Queensland, mainly on the Gold Coast, they're also in Brisbane, Townsville and Cairns, this is the Australian Commonwealth Games. And we want all Australians to own this, because these are being held in the Gold Coast or on the Gold Coast for Australia. So let me talk to you about where we are. When I say they're on budget and on time, that means that the bid book, when it was put together 8 years ago, that's the bid to actually win the Games, the budget that was put together then, of course, has to stand up to scrutiny now. Now, that's not very easy. You think about it, could you budget now on what you thought you'd be paying 8 years ago? But we've got to limit it. So what we have to do is do things smarter. And that's not easy. Sometimes suppliers believe that because you're running the Commonwealth Games, you're fair go. Well, we're not. I have Scottish ancestry. We're not. So we try and do things smarter. And we've been tough along the way with negotiations. So when I say on budget and on time, we are on budget and on time, because if the Commonwealth Games are going to have a future, and if Australia is going to keep the excellent reputation it has for running events like the Olympics and the Commonwealth Games, we have to run them properly. That means they have to be a great event, but the budget itself has to be adhered to, and we have to run it on budget and on time. So, let me come to some of the areas that are challenges, because I've been asked to talk about to give you an update. Ticket sales are absolutely fantastic. We are in fact on par with Melbourne at this time. In fact, we're slightly ahead. But I'll give you one tip, that while the ticket sales are doing incredibly well, those of you who may have missed out on the ballot for some of the great events, can you just write down midday on November the 20th? There's a reason why I'm telling you that, because what happens is this: each one of the Commonwealth Games associations around the 70 nations and territories has the right to purchase a limited number of tickets. If they don't, and not all of them do, they're returned. So what we do is then put them out to you. And it is first in, best dressed, and they will go back on midday, November the 20th. So this is really, it's no such thing as a free lunch. So in a sense, that's the tip I'm giving you for coming today. Ticket sales have been great. Transport, any games has a challenge with transport. You'll see stories about transport. Transport's in great shape. One of the great legacies of these games is, in fact, a better transport system for the Gold Coast. Those who've been to the Gold Coast recently, and I know the University Games were there, you'll see extension to the light rail. You can move around all of the Gold Coast. There's a doubling of heavy rail from Brisbane, so that is important for the Gold Coast. You'll see that there's a lot of the road blocks, and I mean areas that were jams for traffic, like Ross Street. Those of you who know any local information, they've been cleared, and a lot of money has gone into that. The M1, which is really where I live, the M1, it's my second home, it is a pain in the neck, but we've got a number of strategies to deal with. To begin with, the tickets that people buy include free public transport to the Games. So those people coming from Brisbane, we're encouraging them to get on a train, go to somewhere like Helensvale. You can then get a light rail or a bus directly to the venue itself, and I'll come back to that. So we want people off the M1. For those who do use the M1, the outside two lanes are restricted now for trucks 4.5 tonnes or over. So the inside lane is truck free. That's the first thing. Second thing is we're reducing the speed limit from 100 to 110 in the area where that applies, and in another area where it's 100, it'll go down to 90. Why? Because all the brilliant traffic engineers finally convinced us that if you reduce the speed, you reduce the number of dings. If you reduce the number of dings, you increase the traffic flow. In addition to that, around each one of the road accesses, you're going to see tow trucks, and they're going to have quick responses with the police to every ding to remove it. And finally, what we will have, from Beenleigh down, there'll be 13 park and rides, where there will be buses, and the ticket includes this, as I said, so people will be able to go and park in one of those 10,000 car places, and they'll go straight to the Games. And that will mean that there'll be no vehicles around the venues themselves. So traffic is being sorted, and I have a reliable source who attended the University Games that says the transport plan was brilliant. Not that I want to defame you or point to you, but he's sitting at the end of the table there. He can tell you how good it is. So what are the real concerns? Security is an issue. We've spent a lot of time getting security right. We live in a pretty ugly world. So we've targeted families and young kids. We want them to come to the Games to be inspired by the heroes. So when it comes to security, we are spending a mozza to get it right, because we want people to be safe. So we will use the latest technologies, and we make no excuse for this. That'll be facial recognition, CCTV, we'll use drones. The police have been given extra powers, which means that if you get on a train in Brisbane, you're heading to the Gold Coast, you've got a backpack, you'll be searched. And there will be police, there'll be undercover police on all the trains, and they are specifically trained to identify people by way of movements who are likely to be threats. And when you go to the venues, it'll be like going into an airport. You'll go through all the security system. There'll be 10,000 personnel on the ground. That'll be Queensland Police. There'll be 4,300 security guards, and there'll be Australian Defence Force as well. Yesterday, the CEO, Mark Peters, and I went through the headquarters, which is put together by the Queensland Police, ASIO, the Federal Police, ambulance, fire services, they're in one particular location, and they were going through a mock exercise. I can tell you that it's extraordinarily well organised. And the Queensland Police have done an amazingly good job. The security team in Gold Dock has looked at all the tragedies that have happened in France, that have happened in Europe. They've spent time going to London, obviously the Olympics, they've gone to Glasgow. So they know through intelligence sharing what the risks are, and they know what the latest responses are as adopted by agencies around the world. This will be world class, and it needs to be. So frankly, the safest place in Australia during the Commonwealth Games will be at the Games. Now, some of those powers will only survive during the Games. As someone who does believe in individual rights and civil liberties, you know, I'm uncomfortable about some of these things, but frankly, at the end of the day, our job is to keep people safe, and that's exactly what we'll do. In terms of the Queen's Baton, I have to tell you, I'm so delighted that there are just over 440 Victorians who are going to carry the baton, and it arrives here on Christmas Eve and will go around Australia for 100 days. And you'll see 440 of your local heroes who will be carrying it. And why did we do it that way? Because we've got local, if you like, teams in each state to select who the local heroes were. And that is about community engagement, because we want this event to be owned by all Australians. Volunteers, we wanted 15,000 and got 47,000. So the biggest problem we've had is to manage that, because we need to treat everybody with respect. And what we're trying to do out of this, again, is leave a legacy of people to be volunteers. We all know in our changing society, less and less people want to volunteer, and that's not great. So we are trying to encourage those who weren't successful and those who have been successful to have a life of actually volunteering to make it a safer place. In terms of firsts, there's a number of firsts, and I'm very proud of these. This is the first international event where there's the same number of medals for women as there are for men. Doesn't happen at the Olympics, has never happened at a Commonwealth Games. This is the first time ever that will happen, because we actually believe in equality, we believe in being inclusive, and we think that's a really important message to send. It's also the first Commonwealth Games where we've got rugby sevens for women. And I can tell you one of the great things, it's like netball finals, sold like that. And indeed, rugby women's final, sold like that. So anyone who tells you that women's sport doesn't sell tickets and is not popular is obviously on something illegal and need to be supported or helped in some way. The other thing that's important is it's inclusive. This is the biggest para sport event that the Commonwealth has had, and it's inclusive. It's like society. People with a disability don't live in a corner, they are part of us. So what happens is this, you will go to the swimming and you'll see a parasport event, then you'll see a non-parasport event. And it's all in the one program. Now these are a number of firsts that we're really proud of, because that is what society should be about. And that's where the Commonwealth Games needs to leave a lasting legacy, so that this is something different. I mean, the Olympics is ruthless, hard competition, as a number of stars in this room will tell you. Yes, we want great competition, but we also want to have a heart. We want to make certain that this is about inclusiveness, but actually leaving a legacy that improves the society, not just the Gold Coast, but sends a message globally about what we stand for as an event. On other things that I want to deal with quickly, we have also want to make certain that this changes the Gold Coast and contributes to Australia. The village, the Athletes' Village, which will be sensational, one of the best we believe that the Commonwealth Games has had, it will become, after the Games and the parkland around it, it'll become a health and knowledge precinct. So what we want is when people drive past this very colourful village to see it, and remember the Commonwealth Games, then we want to see there, in partnership with Griffith University and the public and private hospital, which is right next door, world-class research that's going to save lives and prolong lives. And that changes the economy of the Gold Coast. When I was a kid, the Gold Coast was a boom and bust. That's what happened. And it was really based around construction and tourism, both of which are really important. And we want a lasting legacy for tourism and construction. But what's happening now is there are more jobs in education and health. So if you've got a research component, you're going to grow that part of the economy. You'll get research outcomes from this health and knowledge precinct that can be commercialised into jobs, commercialised into companies. And the same, goes for education. Griffith University, Bond University are great universities, and you can see what they're doing. In terms of the other legacies, one of the other venues will become a sound stage for the making of movies. which is, again, something you would expect to happen on the Gold Coast. And in addition to that, you've already seen, and the University Games is a good indication of this, you've signed up to do University Games there for the next 4 years, I think, out of 5. So that's already part of the sporting legacy. People can see great venues, great transport, great place to have an event, which is why you've got that level of commitment, and I thank you for having done that. So if you said to me, where are the games are at? Yes, we're in great shape. We're in a good position. What does annoy you? And I want to share this with you because when you're chairman and you're in my state of life, you can actually say what you like, do what you like, because you really want to put something back, and you can say things you wouldn't otherwise say. We acknowledged sponsors before, and we have about 54 sponsors, about 50 we've announced. But one thing that really gets on my goat is this. We have 4 banks in this country that are making an absolute mozza. Not one of them is a sponsor for the Commonwealth Games. I just think that's an outrage. It annoys me. I mean, if they were in trouble, I can understand it. But if you're going to invest in the future where we want to inspire a whole new generation of athletes, surely a small $1 million or $1.5 million, maybe it could come out of somebody's bonus along the way, would not be missing to see an inspiration for a whole new generation of athletes and to do something. We are an obese nation. We're not as bad as the Americans, but we're pretty close. So what do we need to do? We need our athletes, our stars, our heroes, and you're going to see plenty of them out there. They'll be inspiring a nation. We want to see young kids inspired to be active and to do something. And I just say to the 4 banks today, and I would ask you to report this widely, come on, guys, a little bit of money for the future of Australia is not that too hard to ask for. Can I thank you for the opportunity to be here? I'm delighted that we are sharing the message. Just remember, you were part of the best Commonwealth Games ever. All we want to do, we don't want to beat you, we just want to match you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Let's talk about Kevin Rudd. No, I'm only joking. Tempting, but later. Peter gave a brief introduction, but I do want to formally welcome our other special guests here, starting with next to Peter, Steve Moneghetti. He competed at 4 Commonwealth Games, correct me if I'm wrong, winning the marathon in 1994 in Victoria, Canada. He won bronze in the 96 Olympics. He'll be Australia's chef de mission at the Games, after being the chef de mission for the last 2 games as well in Glasgow and Delhi. Please make him welcome. Caitlin Bassett, Seabass. Always fantastic to see you.
I think I'm in trouble when people call me Caitlin, so thank you.
She, of course, as you would all know, the captain of the Australian Diamonds, the very successful Australian Diamonds, also goal shooter with the Sunshine Coast Lightning. Caitlin Seabass completed at the 2014 Commonwealth Games, winning gold with the Diamonds, recently installed as captain and determined to win gold again on the Gold Coast. Please make her welcome. Cathy Freeman, where do I start? Cathy, as you know, is nothing short of an Australian athletics legend. We all know where we were on that night in September 2000 when she blitzed the field in the 400-metre event at the Sydney Olympics. She has also competed in 3 Commonwealth Games, picking up 4 gold medals and starting your Commonwealth Games experience, if I'm correct, as a sprightly 16-year-old in Auckland back in 1990. Cathy is proudly a Commonwealth Games Gold Coast ambassador. Please make her very welcome as well. I just want to pick up with our athletes, current and former, starting with you, Steve, if we just do around the grounds. You've competed both here in Australia and overseas at various events. What does it mean to you as an athlete to compete before a home crowd?
Obviously, it's interesting in my career. I made that first team at Commonwealth Games in '86, and I didn't run a marathon on Australian soil until my last one in Sydney. So it took me a long time to learn how to do it on home soil, and when I did, that opportunity was remarkable. And I'll never forget coming into the stadium. We're fortunate in the marathon because we get a long time to enjoy it. I was out there for a few hours and had a lot of support out on the course, obviously, and then to be able to run that last lap around the stadium was incredible, the roar. And you know, that's the human emotion that you try and block out as an athlete, but for me to be able to do that in that last 500 metres and take it in was special and something I remember for the rest of my life. And, you know, we're obviously going to experience that on the Gold Coast. That's the one thing with the marathon. You're out on the road. It's a free event, Peter, so we can get out and enjoy that event and watch those athletes and support them. And for the athletes, it's quite significant, no doubt about it.
Great route on the Gold Coast as well as a marathon. Very flat.
Very flat, yes. The similar course to the Gold Coast Marathon, only in reverse. So they'll be very familiar, and a lot of the athletes have run very fast. The fastest marathon time for the men in Australia is on that course. So certainly we'll be fast and furious.
We hope so. Caitlin, what does it mean to you to compete before a home crowd next year?
Oh, firstly, I'd just like to say it's an honour to be here and sitting between these two legends. Steve, I watched an advert when I was a child of you. You were running on carpet.
You were born, at least,
I
I'm assuming,
was.
just.
You were in a TV commercial, and I've probably watched it about 50 million times. You were running on a bit of carpet. And so when you were chef de mission, I was very excited. And the first time I saw you was in Glasgow, and you were running, cutting laps around the village. So that was amazing. And
That's
Kathy,
right, and there will be carpet in the village, I can guarantee that.
And Kathy, obviously watching you and your race, I don't think I've ever been so nervous before a sporting event in my life, including my own, watching you before that race. And seeing you on the start line, I actually felt like the whole country was next to you, and you've inspired a nation, you've inspired females to get out there and to give it a crack and that you can achieve anything. So, yeah, I'm blessed to be here, and as an aspiring journo as well. Thank you, Melbourne Press Club, for inviting me down. I'm 3 units away from my degree, so probably take me another 3 years, but I'll get there one day. I will. But part of the reason for me moving to Queensland this year, I come from Perth, was to be closer to the Games, because I think it's going to be one of the most exciting events. Obviously, I went to Glasgow and that was fantastic, but I think I wasn't in Melbourne, but I think Queensland is just going to be as special, if not better.
Thank you. And Kathy, you told me a great story about how you felt when back in 1993 you learnt that the Sydney Olympics were going to be in Sydney and you were going to run before the home crowd. Just take us through your feelings.
I'm glad I didn't embarrass myself with that story with you, given that you're asking me to share it. I kind of came up with this analogy about Astro Boy. Do we know who Astro Boy is even? And you know how he gets those turbo jets at the bottom of his feet, and I think he gets them at the end of his hands as well. Does anyone? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I remember clearly. Haven't even shared this with you, my husband, yet, but when I found out that Sydney were getting the Games, I became like Astro Boy. All of a sudden, my feet had developed these turbo jets, and I just felt like incredible. So I know exactly how these athletes, these first-timers, will feel, especially come next year.
And how proud are you, given your fantastic experience and all of your achievements, to be an ambassador for this fantastic event?
I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty pumped. I'll be nervous for the athletes though, but I'm so happy. I'm a Queensland born. You know, I'm from Mackay, Central Queensland. Although I have been living in Melbourne since 1991. But no, I'm thrilled, very proud to be an ambassador, thank you. And I have to mention Optus as well.
Yep. Not the banks.
Yeah, not
And Michael, who could forget, Kathy, I remember being on the team in 1990, this young, fresh-faced kid running in the relay team and just handling that moment and, you know, being so excited about being there. And look at the career that then unfolded for Kathy, and that's what we'll see on the Gold Coast. We'll be introduced to athletes like Riley Day and sports people who they will become household names. I remember in Kuala Lumpur, my tenure and the kids were staying at a hotel and this lady was catching the bus and said, "Oh, who are you? Oh, I'm going out to watch my son." What's your son? "Oh, Ian Thorpe." "Oh, okay, what does he do?" We didn't actually know that he was pretty good, but we didn't know.
He clearly wasn't in a carpet ad, was he?
He was not in a carpet ad. No, he might have been in a pool ad, I reckon, more likely. But and obviously for him to have that career then that sprung from out of Commonwealth Games. So we will be introduced to athletes at the Commonwealth Games, not only athletes that will be successful, but who also then carry our nation for many years to come.
And speaking of which, lots of attention on the diamonds. Caitlin, how is the team shaping up and what do you see having got the pools now? Who do you see as the main threat? Is it the mother country?
Yeah, look, the pool selection was very exciting, and I think we're in a great pool. New Zealand and England have each other in another pool, so we hope that they knock each other off. And there's already speculation that we're going to face England in the final, which I think would be very exciting. Traditionally, it has always been Australia and New Zealand. And in Delhi, unfortunately, I didn't make the Delhi team, but I watched and it went into double extra time. And unfortunately, we ended up losing that game. And I think it just added something for the next time in Glasgow. Although I wasn't there, I just felt that extra pressure wanting to beat those Kiwis. So that's definitely going to be the aim. I would love to play New Zealand. I think they're our closest country and our best foe. We absolutely play our best when we play against them. But plenty of fantastic games. Like was mentioned before, the netball sold out super quick. My family, I think, are disappointed because some of them can't come along. But it's going to be amazing. So many events happening, not only in the Gold Coast, but across Queensland, up in Cairns and Townsville as well. And I think having new sports there like beach volleyball, rugby sevens, I think is just showcasing the great venues that we've got in Queensland and the beautiful beaches.
Before I toss a question to you, Peter, there are a couple of microphones around the room there, so please raise your hand and ask a question to anybody on the panel. We always have this debate about Commonwealth Games and Olympics about potential white elephants. All this money spent on athletics, stadiums, other facilities. How confident are you that there'll be no white elephants left over on the Gold Coast?
Very confident. Griffith University has done an assessment that says the economic benefit for the state will be about 4.6 billion. The investment is around about $1.5 billion for the state, and there is more that will take it up to about $2 billion. Each one of the venues will be used for other purposes. Carrara, you know, is already an AFL venue. Another is for the Titans. I mentioned that one of them will be used as a sound stage. The velodrome that's been built in Brisbane will be global. It's brand new and it will be attracting. At the moment, Adelaide's the only other place in Australia with a velodrome of great quality. So none of them. We've used existing venues, or where the new ones have been built, they'll be used. Like hockey, for example, needed a better venue. Well, it has one.
We've got a question here. Yeah, Mike.
Mike Osborne from AAP. This question's for Peter, and it's the Melbourne Press Club, so it's a question of self-interest. But as a long-time sports reporter who was lucky enough to cover Steve in 1986 and Kathy in 1990, one of the big issues that the major media, print media, has at the moment relates to the terms and conditions around which we can cover these games. News Corp and Fairfax, who are sponsors, but like AAP, are having troubles with these signing these terms and conditions. And I know they've been under discussion with legal teams for a long, long time, many months. But we haven't got anywhere. The games are getting closer, and the Australian media at this stage is the print media will be at a disadvantage in covering the games to our print colleagues from overseas in relation to access to athletes and what we can and can't do with video online. And we'd really like to know what Goldoc is going to be doing to fix that, to make sure that we can cover the games properly.
This is a very difficult question and is hard to resolve. Mandy, as you know, has been leading these negotiations for Goldoc. We still believe that there can be some resolution of these matters, and we are determined to do it because we don't want to have boycotts from anyone towards the games themselves. For those of you who haven't followed, this is often an issue that resonates between the broadcasters, the people who actually pay to broadcast, and those who do the free-to-air and access to actually bringing to your traditional readers the events of the games themselves. There is an agreement yet, you're right. We are determined to get an agreement. We don't want to boycott. All I ask you is to stick with us and be patient. I know this is a pain. Tom has already shared his view with me a little bit later on. Tom, I hope you don't mind me mentioning that. But one of the things is, frankly, Tom, I don't know if you don't mind me mentioning the rugby league, or do you?
Too late.
You sure? No, sorry, Tom. It was a private conversation, but I'm not in politics anymore, so I share everything. It's one of those sort of things you feel. Look, there was an ongoing negotiations involving Channel 7 and the broadcast of rugby league. Now, there's been an accommodation reached. Now, maybe that can be a model that can be used elsewhere. We do want to get an outcome. I was involved in the early discussions. I haven't been in more recent times because I've been obviously focused on transport, security, all the things I talked about. Based on what Tom has said to me and what you've said, I will go back and talk to Mandy about it.
Steve, I want to ask you about your job as chef de mission. I was in Delhi, and probably the most challenging 2 weeks of my life. Logistical issues, getting from point A to point B, and I think you were feeling it as well, doing a fantastic job. There are issues in Glasgow and the athletics camp, of course, which you had the job of trying to smooth over. I read a quote recently where you say you're a nice guy but can be a tough bastard. I'm paraphrasing. If the situation arises, take us through what you see as the job of this mysteriously named the title of chef de mission.
Michael, first thing is you can't believe what you read or hear, obviously. So, no, it's interesting. It's a difficult role, and everyone hears about the good sides of the role. But my role is to protect the brand that is the Commonwealth Games. That these we all represent, and many people in this room would understand that. And so within that becomes a responsibility for the team. So it's making sure that the team represent themselves appropriately, and especially at a home games. I mean, there's a responsibility on the athletes to do that. So, I say what I do is I probably make sure that the operational team, and we have a couple of them here today, Jonathan and Tim, Maddie and Craig, I allow them to do the operational stuff and hopefully let Caitlin get on doing what she does, and I take all the stuff that interferes with that. So I hope that that's the role that I can do, and also make sure that the athletes get the opportunity to have a good experience. Unfortunately, it is about also the athletes performing well, so we want to make sure there's an environment that allows the athletes to do that. Anything that impacts on that, that's when I will be making those hard decisions, because that's unfair. If there's noise in the village, if someone's doing something that's not allowing Caitlin to sleep, perform, eat, well then, that's not fair. So you've got to understand that it's not just an individual's role, it's what happens in respect to the rest of the team. So a lot of my role, there is no job description. I love what I do, and if you have a passion for it, we find a way. And, I think we've seen the passion, don't you just love being? How good is it to be here when these people are so passionate about what they're doing and what the Commonwealth Games means to them? You probably know, I was the last person picked for the Commonwealth Games in 1986. I owe my career to the Commonwealth Games. So when somebody says to me, the Commonwealth Games are irrelevant, give me an hour, because I'll tell you how relevant they are to me. So they are such an important game. I was the mayor of the Commonwealth Games here in Melbourne, of which I proudly wear the suit today. The number of welcoming ceremonies I did, people have heard this story, and for the 70 countries, it's not about winning medals. It's about being accepted within the Commonwealth. And for those, I've never seen so much emotion. I wanted to do those welcome ceremonies because it's an opportunity for those countries to feel a part of the Commonwealth. How often do we have countries an event where we are embracing 70 countries across the Commonwealth? That's what the Commonwealth Games do. It's not about winning medals in sports. It is for us, obviously, but for a lot of it, it's about that experience, that sharing of the spirit of the Commonwealth Games. They're called the friendly games, and so they should be.
And beating England.
And beating England, that's right, exactly. In netball, most particularly.
I agree. From netball's point of view, this is our biggest event in terms of multi-sport event. We don't get to go to the Olympics, and so for us, the Commonwealth Games is an amazing thing to be a part of, because for the first time in our careers, we get to be part of the greater Australian team. And that was the thing that I took out of Glasgow, was making friends with so many other of the elite athletes in the Australian teams was so much fun. And we went and watched the swimming, we went and watched the hockey. They came and supported us, and it was just building that greater Australian team bond, which was so much fun. And now wherever I go and I travel around to different states, I see people who I was at Com Games with, and we have that special bond. And for netball, it is very important. And unfortunately, we play on the first day of the games, and our medal is the last one announced. So we don't have time, I guess, to sit back and relax and enjoy it as much as we probably want to, or as much as other sports get the chance to do. And I guess that's why Steve's job is so important, because for us, we're balancing taking it all in, enjoying ourselves, being a part of such an amazing competition, but also making sure that we're doing our job when we're there, which is for us to win a gold medal.
And Kathy, what does the Commonwealth Games spirit mean to you, having competed in so many other events, including the Olympics, of course?
Well, I can draw on my earliest memories. I kind of went a bit crazy in the village because I put on how many kilograms and my coach was really worried. But we ended up winning the gold medal in the 4x100 metre relay. But I think I just soaked up on all of the energy and the excitement and, being in the same team as my idol, Debbie Flanoff-King, the Olympic gold medalist. And I thought, wow, this is pretty exciting. And seeing Merlene Ottey, the great Merlene Ottey from Jamaica, walking around the place. And, when you're a 16-year-old kid from a small town, it's a pretty thrilling moment. Trying on the Australian uniform for the first time. Remember Mona at Sydney, at the university in Sydney, and it's thrilling, and it just defines your character in that moment, and it stays with you forever.
We've got a question from Kilvington Grammar over here. So I've warned Peter before, these students often ask harder questions than journalists, so yeah. And Kathy knows that too, so take it away.
Hi, I'm Jack from Kilvington Grammar, and I was just wondering, we obviously live in an increasingly sedentary society, and I was just wondering, what would you say to the younger generation about the importance of exercise and the link to well-being?
Yeah, obviously, we've been fortunate to be involved in elite sport, but interestingly, I think if you were to ask us, we love what we do. I started running because I just enjoyed the freedom, the self-esteem that it gave me. There are so many values that you get out of being involved in sport, and for me to have gone on that journey has been so significant for me. And I don't like. I less like telling people that we need to, I think we all realise, we're more sedentary and we need to get people more active. I want buy-in from those. I want buy-in from you. I can't tell you that you should be involved in sport because of all these reasons, but if you aspire because of the role models that you're seeing here today, and you then benefit from the mental benefit, the physical, the social, all of those things, then you will stay involved and you will love it and you'll find a passion. And after that, my job is done. So it's not, I don't want to lecture. I think we really need as a nation to have ownership of it and realise, hey, no, it's not just obesity will be solved if we have other reasons for people wanting to be involved in sport and exercise. So that's our challenge.
Kathy?
Yeah, thank you. Two thoughts. One is what I tell our 6-year-old kid, Ruby, and one of the reasons why I don't drive her to do much. Well, there are some things, obviously, that a mother has to drive their kid to do, but certainly when it comes to her well-being and to her sense of getting to know who she is and learning about her strengths and accepting that, yeah, she's got weaknesses and she needs to work on it, and learning about, those values around perseverance and determination. I tell you, sporting environment is the best place to be for that, hands down.
Yeah, I guess for me, netball was always a social thing for me. It was never about wanting to be captain of the Australian Diamonds. That happened along the way. But the reason why I love playing netball so much is because the people who I get to play with. I'm not the fittest, the fastest, the strongest. For me, netball was a place where a really awkward, gangly, taller than all the boys, girls, got to fit in and feel at home. And for me, the self-esteem that I got from being a part of something bigger than myself, learning to work as a team, everything that comes with sport is just, it's made my life. And for me, it is enjoyment, like these two here. It is all about enjoyment for me, and it's not about pushing to be elite. I think that comes with fun. Once you enjoy something, you get passionate about it, you want to do it more and more and more. I think the focus needs to be less on, elite and joining in because you want to have fun or because you want to make some new friends. Or for me, training is hard. It's really hard. And I go to training because I do it with my teammates and they support me and they encourage me. So I think just changing that mindset into sport becoming something that helps you through the tougher parts of your life, which is what it did for me.
Terrific answers. I think we've got a question over here.
Shane McGuinness from 3AW. Steve, you alluded to it before, that if we gave you an hour, you could talk about how great the Commonwealth Games are. But as Peter alluded to, the 2022 Games aren't locked in. They're tentatively in Birmingham. Does it disappoint you that there isn't a buy-in around the Commonwealth to host these Commonwealth Games, and does it make you question the future of this event, despite the success we saw here in Melbourne, we saw in Glasgow, and we'll hopefully see on the Gold Coast next year?
It did, Shane. It's interesting because everyone who would have had a conversation with me, we were probably shaky out of Dally. Glasgow, fantastic, and did a great job, but then we need to share them across the Commonwealth. It can't always be England, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, so we need to be realistic about spreading the Commonwealth message, and certainly I thought South Africa was going to be good for that, and as was India. So, but in my own circumstance, I think we've turned the corner, and the regional games, and who hasn't been to the Gold Coast and seen what's happening up there at the moment? It is phenomenal. We had the chefs meeting a couple of weeks ago. We went out to Coomera. Peter hasn't even mentioned Coomera. We went out there and there was kids in the gymnastics pit. They were playing futsal, basketball, and I'd been there before, so I was kind of thought, I'll engage with a couple of parents. So I chatted to one of the parents and said, how good is it having this venue, and do you live nearby? And he said, yeah, I live nearby. I said, gee, how lucky are you? And he goes, yeah, I'm really lucky, but I just sensed there was this sort of hesitation. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, those Commonwealth Games next year, we've got the touch footy fields next door, and they're going to have to sort of use that for parking, so it's going to interrupt the touch footy competition for next. I'm suddenly thinking, gee, am I going to tell this guy or not? You've got this magnificent stadium there, and that it is only because of this event that's going to impact on your touch footy next year. But that facility, it was almost like, we talk about legacy after the games. This is already a legacy. The community had ownership of this, and I saw it firsthand. And have those chefs out there seeing that, and to feel like in the continuum of that community, sport and the Commonwealth Games were an interruption. Now, I tell you, that's what the Commonwealth Games have brought to that community in a regional sense. Now, shouldn't we share that across South Africa, Africa, the Commonwealth, Asia? Why shouldn't we? I went to 4 Commonwealth Games. Each of them was on a different continent. Now, that's the only way that I was going to all of those continents, was using the Commonwealth Games as a vehicle. Now, I tell you, as I say, I'll give you... it's not about me, so I think you understand the passion that I have for the Commonwealth Games. They are not an Olympic Games. I'm glad they're not. There is something special about a Commonwealth Games that is unique. They are multi-sport, but as we've already hearing, the camaraderie that we get within the Australian team. No, I don't need to mix with the other countries. Just within the Australian team itself is infectious. I want to be the chef de mission because I get the opportunity to mix with another Australian team in retirement. That doesn't happen very often. So for me, it's all about that experience, and the Commonwealth Games is one of the unique vehicles in that. And Peter and his team are doing a great job in enhancing the reputation of the Commonwealth Games.
And while we're speaking about the Commonwealth, Peter, and apologies, I should know this, have we got a royal lockdown to open there?
Yes, Prince Charles is coming. Her Majesty...
We want Harry. And Meghan
Meghan.
Markle, please.
You can imagine how difficult a question that would be. Your Highness, we would prefer someone else. I don't think so. Prince Charles is coming, and Prince Edward, of course, who is the vice patron of the Commonwealth Games. Can I just mention one thing really quickly? Steve hit the nail on the head, and I should have mentioned this before, and it's relevant to your question. All these facilities are being used by the community. They're finished early, and that means that the community can own them, they can use them, they'll be part of them, and when they see their heroes perform, we've got 3 heroes here, that will inspire them to continue to use them.
Chip Legrand from The Australian.
Peter, this one's for you. So the Gold Coast has developed a reputation over many years as being something of a Bermuda Triangle for professional sports organisations. So what would you say is the key things to understanding the Gold Coast as a sports market, and what advice would you give to organisations that have found it confounding?
Well, that's a good question, and as Michael indicated before, I've just joined the NRL as a commissioner as well, and the Titans are going through a sale right at the moment. I actually think that the Gold Coast will be changed significantly by the Games. And that's not just the infrastructure and all the things we've already talked about, so I won't cover them, but it's about involvement and engagement. I mentioned the number of people who volunteered. We wanted 15,000, we've got 47,000. I think you'll find in all these things, people who were nominated for the baton, for example, you've suddenly got this huge engagement across the Gold Coast. I think that's going to continue for the sporting teams. And I know from another role I have that the Titans and the Suns have got huge support in the local community. I'm quite optimistic that when they improve in terms of their performance on the field, you're going to see an enormous amount of support increase in what they do, whatever they do. So am I positive about where those sporting teams, and I get your point about the Bermuda Triangle, the history of this, you're absolutely right. I think you're going to see a new Gold Coast. You'll see it in terms of involvement, you'll see it in terms of all the things that we've talked about. What advice would I give? I would say to anyone, this is the sixth largest city in Australia. It's got infrastructure it didn't have before. It's got engagement it didn't have before. People used to drive cars. They never got on public transport. Now you've got this fantastic light rail project that runs one end of the coast to the other, and there'll be a stage 3 at some point. Why would you get in a car? So suddenly the mindsets are starting to change. The other final thing, which is a real point I want to make to you, you're finding youth engagement. One of the reasons why the Gold Coast was a challenge before, half of Melbourne came to the Gold Coast as retirees when Joe abolished death duties. You know the history of it. That's why everyone on the Gold Coast loves Melbourne. That's why I have to say nice things about Melbourne. Seriously. But that's what happened. So the population is changing. And these games are inspiring a whole generation of young people to get engaged, as Steve said, in the venues. That will last after the games. What are they going to do? They're going to go to the footy venues, the ones they went to see their teams, the Australian team, perform at during the games. So I'm very optimistic. This is a turning point in terms of teams on the Gold Coast.
Question over here, yep.
Peter, Michael Ramsey from AAP. You touched on the additional police powers a little earlier. Just wondering, are there other contingencies in place, and particularly restrictions on public movement, shutting down public areas, that sort of thing? And how do you sort of strike the right balance there with people's rights, I suppose, and keeping everywhere safe?
Look, this is a difficult question, and you know, I've spent most of my life as a civil libertarian lawyer, so you can understand that this was a matter of some interest to me, and I followed it really closely. I think we do have the right balance. It means, for example, if you want to get into a venue quickly, don't bring a backpack. If you want to get into a venue without going through the long line, don't bring much with you. Now, we understand mums will want to bring support for young kids, and we've got mechanisms to deal with all of that. We are quite sensitive to who the people are who are coming. 70% of the people who bought tickets were women, right? The power of women in terms of buying power. That's a note, by the way, for any sporting organisation. You want to sell tickets? Women will make 70% of those decisions. So you need to be smart about what you do in terms of marketing to women. So we've got to be sensitive to all of those things. But at the end of the day, we think we've got the balance right. You can't allow someone to go on a backpack on a train from Brisbane to the Gold Coast without being searched. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the world in which we live. These powers only exist for the games. So have we erred on the side of tough powers? Yes, we have. Did we have to do that? Yes, we did. But if somebody turns up, they get on a train at Roma Street in Brisbane, go all the way to Carrara via public transport, they're bringing with them the necessities to have a lot of fun, they're not going to be inconvenienced. What these powers do is keep them safe. And the other point about it is, why would you bring a large pack to a sporting event anyway? If you're sitting here with Steve and you've got your bag half under his seat, he can't enjoy the event either. And yes, we've banned a whole lot of things like loud people that make noise, loud hailers, those sorts of things. So why would you want to disturb an athlete that's is in the zone trying to perform? So at the end of it, we've published, the government's published a list of things that are banned. It was in the regulations that went through the Parliament. We've been absolutely transparent about it. We know the sensitivity about it, but we've got the balance right.
Mary Guerin.
Hi, Mary Guerin from the ABC. Peter, another one for you. You've slammed the banks, and I'm not sure you quite drilled down into the reasons why you think they're not on board. Presumably they might say, well, if it were a good enough proposition, they would get on board to sponsor the Commonwealth Games. What do you think is at play, and is there any other part of the corporate Australia that's missing that you'd like to goad into sponsorship today?
Look, I think obviously we've got huge sponsorship from corporates, and we've done very well out of it, and I want to thank those who have sponsored, so I don't want to be unkind. It's just that the banks do have record profits. I don't think it's unreasonable to invest in another future generation of Australians, to be inspired by the heroes that are sitting here, to answer the question that was asked over here. Why? I think because culturally they're actually out of touch. I don't think they understand that they have a social obligation. If you are a corporate and you make a lot of money out of Australians, you've got to reinvest. Some of them do. NAB, for example, was the sponsor for the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. So let me be frank about that, they were. I just think they've become like a big bureaucracy and they don't understand they have a role out in the community. And for four banks that are as popular as a pork chop, frankly, I would have thought there was an advantage for them to re-engage with the community. And I think that's the heart of it, to be honest. I just think they're out of touch. And I don't like to be critical of anyone, but the facts of the matter are I think it's a poor state of affairs that they're not backing Australia's future athletes, because when they see what will happen, when Australians follow this in the way they are, and we know from our own research, Australians love the Commonwealth Games, they love them being held on the Gold Coast, they're going to regret not being part of it. But they also have a social responsibility. And it's not just about making a buck, it's about putting something back. And I don't think they get that anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm not a marketer, but it strikes me the Commonwealth Bank and...
I use that line, I got to tell you, that's absolutely right.
Anyway, we've got a few minutes to go, by the way, so if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand or forever hold your peace. We spoke to Caitlin before about the netball chances. Cathy, you've been keeping an eye on some young athletes in the track and field department. I want to ask you about who you see as medal hopes generally, but you're also very good friends with Super Sally Pearson. How is she going? How's her training going? And what do you see as her prospects at the hurdles?
Is that actually what the media call her, Super Sally?
That's what I call her.
Oh, okay. Just want to be clear. Well, she is super in every single way. I adore the girl. I love her. What was the question again? Sorry. I think I fell in.
It was a super question.
Distracted by being
what do you see as her prospects? How confident are you looking at her that she will take out gold next year?
Off the record, I said something to you earlier. I mean, of course I have complete faith in her that she will get out and achieve what she will want to achieve.
And you mentioned a couple of younger athletes as well you're keeping an eye on?
Riley Daly is
Yes.
always exciting. These young ones coming through. All this excitement, so much to look forward to. She seems to have a good temperament. I don't know her all that well, but she seems like she's got a lovely lovely family, stability. She's put stability in her life, and she's hungry, which is it's a pretty important part of the recipe as well.
Yeah. And
Steve?
Alan Nelson, who has had a really good season a couple of seasons ago, and Dave will know, Lauren Wells actually, our 400-metre hurdler, almost jumped to qualifying, I think, the other day in the long jump as well, didn't she, Dave? So our women are really going enormously well, and we talk about our marathon runners. We've got an oversubscription of qualifiers in the women's marathon. We've had great success, and Michael Shelley, obviously defending champion from Glasgow. Was that a remarkable run? And you think of Karen McCann here at the MCG, Deek in '82. Lisa Ondieki. We've got some great history.
Monas in Victoria, Canada.
That's right. Yeah, that wasn't so famous as the other ones, but certainly those performances, they stay in our minds, and that's what you bring that to the crowd. So it's a collaboration. One thing that Peter did mention, and I don't want to gloss over it, is these games are held on the Gold Coast, but one thing we do that's different to everywhere else in the Commonwealth is these are Australia's games. We own them. And it is a collaboration. We've got a collaboration at CGA with the APC and the AIS to make sure that we have the best prepared team. We've also got a collaboration with you guys. That's what we're here to make sure that we have that ownership and that belief that these will be the best games ever. They won't be the best games ever unless everyone collaborates. That's a fact. We know that. That's why we're here. So it's important that we all understand that. You've got to have buy-in. Why wouldn't you want to buy into the Commonwealth Games? We obviously know, but I don't think the questions that you're asking are very relevant. They are relevant to me because Jack's question, Shane, Mike, these are questions because you want to be involved in the Commonwealth Games. That to me, I go away from here being positive about you wanting to have buy-in, because these will be a very successful event. And, we want to do everything we possibly can to make sure that, we're all a part of the journey that we're going on in. 159 days, which I think is 22 Sundays for me, because that's when we do our long run, but Mondays for a lot of people. So they'll be here before we know it.
Well, I think all of Australia, except for the banks, are behind you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to wrap it up there. Please give a very warm thanks to Peter Beattie, Steve Moneghetti, Caitlin Bassett and Cathy Freeman. And a quick reminder, Peter, that date, November the 20th for tickets? Midday, November 20th. Thank you very much all for coming. Back the games, and we'll see you at the next Press Club event. Have a fantastic weekend.